All right, everybody. Hello. Let me do a tech check real quick and just see. Can I get a comment? Is audio working? Can everybody hear me? TBD. Audio working okay? Fabulous. Okay. Very good. All right, real quick. Let's get a gut check like while I finish up and get my slides ready. Where's everybody from? Where are we? Where do y'all live? Hang on, I'm getting slides together. Share one of my screens. We're going to pick, hang on, getting close. It's always something. All right, here we go. All right. Let me know when y'all can see this. Slide should come up. Let me just get a thumbs up. Yeah, cool. All right, let's see. Got folks from all over. Buenos Aires, very cool. Montreal. Shout out to Scottsdale, Arizona. Wish I could get a burrito at Filiberto's. Um, Toronto, never been. Seattle, I know it well. Hanover, never been. Cool. Germany's nice though. All right. Can I get everybody? Can y'all see these? We good. Okay, good. Um, then I'll get moving. Basically, the flow for today is I'm going to cover probably 15 or 20 minutes worth of material and in the slides, and we're not going to answer all the questions because y'all will inevitably have some. Flash is kind of complex, but I want to try to make it simpler, make it easier for folks. So we'll save quite a bit of time for Q&A at the end, and we'll take as much or as little as y'all want to cover. And it could be Flash, it could be something else. Yeah, we're here. We'll let it rip. So yeah, I'm here to help. Okay, let's get going. So first off, let's talk like the magic of Flash. Like, if any of y'all have been paying attention to my work for even a little bit of time, I just love it. Like, I really, really like it, and I like it to be a core part of what I do. But it is mercurial. Like, it can be finicky, and that means it's not the right thing for every situation. It's not always the move, but sometimes it's absolutely the move. And I think one of its biggest powers is it can turn a drab location into something really wild and cool. And I think it's also a tool that many that love our craft and do what we do don't ever learn this. I feel like I talk to photographers all the time that are like, "Oh man, it's a whole thing. I don't really want to learn it. Like I prefer continuous lights or I just want to work with natural light or what have you." And I totally understand that, but once you start to see the matrix on how this works, it's it unlocks a lot of new possibilities, and places that couldn't yield a really cool photo for you can all of a sudden yield a way cooler photo. So, okay, a couple of disclaimers right off the bat. I do not know everything. There are some of y'all may be real lighting experts out there. In my last live stream that I did, there were a couple of questions that I just like, I had to go do some research after. It's okay. Like everybody, every single one of us is at a different point in our journey in the craft. So, second, this is not sponsored. Y'all will see me reference some brands today. There's one that I use quite a bit, but there's no sponsorship whatsoever. I have worked with some of these brands in the past, but yeah, you get it. So, my goal is to help a few people get a little bit better today, and our focus today is going to be direct flash. We're not really going to talk a whole lot about like bouncing it off the wall or the ceiling, etc. Frankly, that's a lot less of a portion of my workflow. So, Okay. Like I said, we'll talk. I'll show you some slides for 15, 20 minutes, and then we'll get into Q&A. Operational details on what to know today. Ask questions. I am here to help. My stream is going to be about a half a minute faster than y'all's, so it don't feel like you got to wait and for Q&A. Feel free to put questions in there as we go, and as I see them come through, I'll put them. I'll hit them. Number two, seeking feedback. Like at the end, y'all, you'll get a chance to let me know, give me some feedback on how this went. This is the first time I'm running this session as a live stream. I taught it live at a Glazer's Camera last weekend in Seattle. But yeah, it is a process of refinement. And then just be cool, treat everybody well. I doubt we're gonna have anybody talking shit in the comments, but you get it. All right. So first off, why somebody might use Flash. Actually, before we get there, real quick, I'll start, but I want to ask everyone, can I get like a scale of 1 to 10? Like just put 1 if you're a total novice, 10 if you're like I do it all the time and it's a really big part of my workflow. I love it. I just want to see some numbers on like how confident do people feel in this, or do they think, hey, you know what? Like I'm really starting from a ground level. Give me just some level of context. Now, a few reasons you might use Flash. The first, like, and most simple one that everybody would expect is it's just too dark to get a good image. You just like, it's night. I'm at a party or a wedding, and it's after the sun is set, whatever it may be. That's a great use for Flash. Sometimes you want to use Flash because you really want to just separate your subject from your background. Like I'm trying to find a way to create some contrast between the person that I'm photographing or the people that I'm photographing and what's behind them. Flash is a great way to do that. You might use Flash as a fill. Like sometimes it's really harsh daylight. And I think that's one of the coolest, most underrated use cases of an off-camera Flash is using it as a way to fill in harsh shadows during broad daylight, because all of a sudden what it does is it allows you to kind of be you have a new weapon in your quest to try to get a cool image. And it all of a sudden noon or like really crappy harsh daylight used to be a time when you didn't want to go take pictures, but you can totally do it. Like both of these were shot somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And I was using fill flash to color in some harsh shadows. So all right, let's see. Got numbers coming in. Okay, so we have some folks that are kind of earlier on the scale. One, two, etc. We got a couple of nines and sevens, eights, folks who do it a lot. Cool. What's up, Dustin? Nice to see you. Um, yeah, daylight fill is a great option for Flash. Another one, just changing the visual feel and texture of an image. Like these are two photos shot in the exact same place. One uses Flash, one is without. So like on the left, Courtney right there, all that is that's that yellow paper backdrop and she's standing against it and she's facing towards a big studio window, like just nice natural light coming in, real simple. And I think you can kind of tell like the shadow back behind her is really soft. There's like a lot of it's pretty contoured. There's not a lot of harsh light there because the light is very diffused coming in. Makes sense. On the right, this is the exact same positioning, just with a flash that's sitting in my hot shoe on this one. I'm shooting it vertically, so that's why you can kind of see the flash was on my left, so that's why her shadow's a little bit on her right, because that's just the path of the light. But this is just, I think, like a decent example. It can really change the tone, the look, the feel of an image, and sometimes you want that. Coffee break. It's my first cup. Okay, now a caution that's kind of built off that last page. Flash should be one of your tools, but you don't want it to be your only tool. This is an example of the exact same scene that I shot. On the left, that's just natural light, and on the right, that's with a flash positioned off camera. The reason I have this image here, or these two images here, is because I want to use it as like a momentary learning detour. I was shooting with my friend John in Los Angeles about 18 months ago. And my first instinct with this scene right here was to do the image on the right, which was position Daniela, the subject, with her back to the light, which you can kind of tell from the left image, and underexpose, and then throw some really strong flash at it to try to create some pop against that background. That was my first gut instinct. And it's not necessarily wrong, but I watched John and how he was shooting it, and his approach was totally different. He was like, nah, I am going to, I'm not going to use flash at all. And I'm just going to properly expose for her. And yeah, it's going to blow out the background a little bit, but this is the plan. Like, I want that kind of soft focus, or maybe not soft focus, but I want that sort of soft diffuse light on the subject. And I just think it makes a good looking image. And as I look at both of them after, I think, yeah, man, like I completely understand that. And this was a good reminder for me that I was leaning too heavily at that point in my career into, like, flash is probably the answer, like almost always the answer. And that was right at the end of 2024. And it made me feel like, okay, over the course of 2025, I got to work more on don't just resort to flash. What can I do with available light? And so I call this out as a reminder, like, amazing tool, you should use it. But just, think through when the right time and when the wrong time is. Another good example. This is my friend Noah back in Dallas. On This is just in like a really simple natural light studio. The photo on the left, no flash. You could just tell the windows on the left of the frame. I think that's great. Like, I love the soft fall off of the shadows on this one. I think it's really cool. On the right, that's him standing pretty much in the exact same position, but using flash. I don't think either one of these photos is better or worse, and your aesthetic tastes may be totally different. But the reason I call this out is like, just know sometimes it's the move, sometimes, it's not. Okay. Now let's start getting into like some technical stuff. This is how I approached it in that workshop last week in Seattle. I think everybody at this point, given the numbers that everyone threw out on the scale, is probably pretty familiar with the exposure triangle. If not, list the question, or we'll hit it in Q&A, because we can absolutely talk about it. But basically, the core of it is when you make a change to one of your three big camera settings, whether it's shutter speed or your aperture, what have you, you're always going to have to think through what is the countermeasure, or the way that's going to affect the other two. So, for example, if you make your shutter speed faster so that the shutter is going to open and close faster, you're going to let less light in. So you might need to compensate in terms of your aperture or ISO. You get it. The way I like to think about flash is that it adds another set of dimensions to the exposure triangle, the rhombus, or like I don't know, the tetrahedron, or whatever it may be. And all of a sudden, you have a new set of dimensions that you've got to pay attention to, some of which are, what is the power of my flash? Like, how strong is that bulb flashing? What is the distance from the subject? Like, is the flash 2 feet away from them or 8 feet away from them? On that note, I didn't write it here, but how strong is the daylight outside? Like, when I showed you all those two daylight photos out there, we were having to absolutely max out that flash because, see above, it was super bright outside. So the flash has a lot of light to compete with. Yeah, distance from the subject. If it's 2 feet away, it's going to have to work less hard than it is if the flash is 8 feet away. The angle to the subject, that's another big one. I'm going to show y'all kind of like how an image gets constructed when I'm shooting on camera, or like with the flash really close to the camera. And then if I've got it really separated, like 3, 5, 6 feet away. And then modifiers too. Sometimes the right look, I think, is like bare bulb flash, like it has that point and shoot look. Sometimes I think you want to go with something different, like you want a little dome diffuser, or even more diffusion with a softbox, which we'll talk about. So, all right, I am just gonna break down. Here's how I typically create my little home base in terms of where I start my settings on my camera for flash. The I don't want y'all to walk away thinking that this is the end all be all, but I wanted to give it to you as like okay, Garrett told me, like, when I'm trying to figure out all these settings and we're in the fog of war on set, or I'm shooting a project and I'm trying to think through like how to get this all right, and stuff isn't working, you can come back to this point and start making some small changes from here, and you're, in most situations, I think you're going to be in okay shape. Not everyone, but it's a decent starting point. So, of the four like dimensions of this like new exposure square, there are two you can pretty much set and forget in 80 to 90+% of situations. The first one is your ISO. You don't need a really high ISO in this situation. I'll typically set it at 400, 800, 200, thereabouts, pretty low, and just leave it. There are situations where you might need to play it differently, but for the most part, do that. Second, set your shutter speed at 1 over 200 and just leave it. There is a mathematical reason for this. I will get to it in a second, but it's not required on every flash, but it'll never do you wrong. And I'll talk to you about why in a second. Then you've essentially got two out of your four variables locked. And now what you're trying to do is you're trying to control for the others. The first is aperture. I tend to like to set my aperture kind of middle of the road when I'm shooting with flash. It starts at f8 and I'll calibrate from there. In general, if you have a narrower aperture, like the number is higher on your f-stop, you're going to let less light in. And typically what I find is that's going to create more contrast between you and your subject. If you have a wider aperture, it's going to be the inverse. Like the effect of that flash and that like flash pop is going to be less significant. Just kind of how it goes. So, and then the last thing, your flash. It's going to be heavily dependent on what your ambient light is, what your distance from your subject is, what your modifier is, etc. But in general, you can lock those first two on the left. You can set your aperture at about an f and 8, and then you at least have started to narrow in all the different things you're going to need to change. So we'll hit more in a second. Okay, a lot of text here. Like, y'all don't have to take notes. Basically, there are a few different modes for a flash. I may not hit all this perfectly, but I wanted to give you like what's enough to know to be dangerous. First, TTL, it means through the lens, or ETTL, sometimes you'll see that depending on manufacturer or what have you. But you can kind of think about it like shooting on automatic, or maybe like program mode or what have you. I don't use this a ton. Essentially, it's letting your equipment do the work in terms of what is the right amount of flash to throw at this particular image based on sensing how much light there is. There are various different approaches that these cameras and these flashes can use to do it, but for the most part, TTL is like let the camera put it on autopilot and think through how much flash you should go. Some good examples of when it's useful. Weddings, parties at night can be a great example. Think about like the first image you shoot, you're 3 feet away from your subject, and then you shoot another group of people that it happens to be 6 feet away from your camera. Like it can do a little bit of compensation for that, and it'll know probably going to need to throw a little bit more flash at it because it's sensing what the image is constructed of. So you also have, if everybody's familiar with exposure compensation, you have something similar on a lot of these flashes called FEC, flash exposure compensation. And it works kind of similarly. Like, how on many cameras you can push your exposure comp up to 3 to go brighter than it would, or down 3 to go darker than it would. That's similar on flash too. So you can say like go TTL but go +1, which is whatever the camera would think how much power it should use for flash, and then one stop above essentially. Um, that's the basics of TTL. That's what I probably would recommend for most people that are getting started out. Let the camera do a little bit of the heavy lifting for you as you get it figured out. So, manual. I tend to shoot in manual most situations. I just kind of like the process of dialing it in, but I'm not saying that it's right. Um, it gives you more control, but you also get more misfires. And the way it'll work is like you'll see a number, and depending on your manufacturer, it will be measured differently. So like in many flashes, you'll see like a fractional system, 1/1, 1/2, 1/4, etc. And as that number at the bottom of the fraction gets bigger, that's less flash. So like the maximum flash power would be 1/1. 1/64, 1/128 would be a lot less in descending order. So other flashes, like a Pro Photo, for example, is going to do it differently. They're going to dispense with the whole fractional system. They're like, this is too complex. I'm going to do a scale that's 1 to 10. 10 is maximum power, 1 is, or zero point 0.5, 0 is minimal power. And either one's fine. It depends on what you get. I think Pro Photo, the ease of use is really easy, but you absolutely pay for it. The price is very high. So, and then high speed sync, like I mentioned 1/200 earlier, like high speed sync, many flashes have this and this capability. And what it does is it breaks one of those main rules of a lot of those flashes, which is you could go faster than 1/2 seconds on a shutter speed. It's not available on all flashes. Some old flashes don't have it. Cheap flashes don't always have it. So like if you get a really cheap speed light on Amazon, might not have it. And then a lot of times studio strobes don't have it. And like the dead ringer for what you can tell on this one is if you're taking an image and your shutter speed is faster than 1 over 200 and you're using flash and you see like one third or a part of your image that's blacked out or like dark or what have you. So, say for example, you're shooting a vertical portrait and your flash is on your left. In that situation, if you take a picture and the left one third of that frame, like on the rule of thirds, is just blacked out, that literally is the physics, is at least the way I understand it, is the flash didn't physically have time to make it all the way to your subject before the shutter closed because it was that's just the speed it was moving at. High speed sync will counteract that. So you could shoot it 1 over 400, 1 over 800, whatever it is. So, okay, next, different ways to trigger a flash. I think this is one of the harder things for a lot of folks coming up, but I think it is a massive unlock. There's two big ways I wanted to talk about it with the group. One is if you trigger your flash on camera. This is oftentimes what you might think about when you think about flash, wedding photos, party photos, etc. It is literally I am mounting the flash in the hot shoe of the camera. It is some characteristics of what those images look like. Probably less pronounced shadows. It can look very point and shoot, like in a good way. I think that aesthetic is cool. If you point it directly at your talent, obviously you can tilt the flash, bounce, what have you. Many people are more familiar with that than I am. It's super reliable. Like, there's a direct connection between your camera and the flash for it to trigger. And it is less tiring on your arms, which I will show you why I mean that in a minute, because I have like a process for holding a flash that I think it like really tires my left arm out. So I'll show you in a sec. On the flip side, triggering off camera, it will create more pronounced shadows. I think it can look a little bit more dramatic or elevated. Another thing to think about is that it is slightly less reliable because what you're doing is instead of mounting your flash in your camera, you see that smaller device in that little picture right there. You're essentially mounting a wireless transmitter in there that will trigger a signal to the flash that also can receive that signal. You get it. It's like a walkie-talkie. I don't know. So it's slightly less reliable. Like it may not always fire, and so there are moments when you're on location, you're like, "Hang on, I gotta figure this out." And if you use the patent pending Garrett King flash hold, which I'll show you in a sec, it's going to tire your left arm out. So I've been talking for a minute. Let me just check and make sure we're doing okay in terms of questions. Everybody good? Yeah. All right, cool. Nothing in there. Awesome. Okay, so there are many ways to modify a flash. We're going to go from like least modification to most. And like, this is not an exhaustive list. I'm just walking you through the big three that I typically use. No modification, like bare bulb. I use this all the time. This is the most raw feeling image. Think like a point and shoot camera. When I say no modification, I don't mean anything fancy. I just mean there's nothing in front of the flash. And it's as just light as it can get. If you ever think about what the bulb looks like on a point and shoot camera that has a flash built in, same thing, right? Just think a bigger version of that. Number two, a dome. This is a little magnetic attachment. I'll show you all a picture of it in a second, or when we get done. And if people want to look at it, it's going to offer some minor diffusion. Like I use a Godox V1 quite a bit, and it works like a speed light. You can mount it in your computer, and I mean, not mount it in your computer. You can mount it in your hot shoe, and but you can also trigger it wirelessly. And then on the bulb, there's a little magnetic ring on it, and you can attach a magnetic dome, and it just softens the light a little bit. So, and then third, a softbox. I'm probably not surprising anybody with this. This will offer major diffusion. Like it's going to really disperse the light in more soft fashion. There's not going to be as much like rich, crunchy contrast around your subject, etc. All are good, but these are typically like the big three that I'm approaching things with. So, okay. Um, a couple of like approaches on how to set up a flash photo. By the way, Liney, I see your question on how to use flash to fill harsh shadows. Yeah, absolutely. We'll hit that in Q&A, no problem. Okay, how I tend to set up a flash photo. Very rarely am I going to trigger a flash in the hot shoe. Like I just don't really mount my light on my camera really anymore. I'm typically always just popping a wireless trigger into the hot shoe and then I'm holding my flash above my shoulder. So this really is like when you guys see my work when I shoot pictures with flash, this is going to be one of the approaches for the most part is cameras in my right hand, of course. I'm holding my flash in my left hand and it's usually like somewhere right here, etc. Sometimes I'll go way out like this if I feel like the look is good, but in general, my approach is pretty simple. Over my left shoulder, hold the light 1 to 2 feet above the subject's eye line and then tilt it 10 or 15 degrees downwards. Essentially, the way to think about this is like imagine how good golden hour looks on nearly any subject when the sun is right about to set. I just really like that look. And so I'm when with flash a lot of times color temperature aside, I'm trying to use the or mimic the angle of that late day sunlight right before the sun sets with how I hold my flash, which if you think about it is like a little bit above eye level, tilted a little bit down. So for the most part, that's going to be typically how I'll hold flash in 80-90% of my work. You can see it like a little screenshot of it here. Similar approach when I go off camera. Um, this is very similar image, but if you can tell, I'm shooting this photo, and then if you look at the path of Haley's shadow, it's back and to the left. What's happening there is in some situations, you have a light stand. Sometimes you just have a person doing it. In this case, it was my wardrobe stylist for that project, Sarah. She's standing, I don't know, 3 to 4 feet to my right, holding that flash, but using that same approach, foot or two above Haley's eye level, tilted slightly down at about a 15 to 30 degree angle. That's it. I can't tell you how often, like if I've got a third person on set shooting BTS or styling, hair, makeup, whatever it is, my approach is very often like, hey, could you come hold a light for me for a sec? Because I tend to pack really light. Okay, so we're near the end of like slides, and then we'll start talking Q&A and anything people want to know. How to build this skill in 3 steps. This may not be relevant for all of you because we got a lot of folks who are somewhere in their journey on Flash. If you're not and you want to figure it out from the very beginning and you want to spend minimal amount of money, under $100, get the cheapest TTL speed light you can. I used to use one from Neewer, Neewer, no affiliation, and it did a lot of heavy lifting on my early Flash work. Like it was great. Menus can be a little finicky, but once you figure it out, it's fine. The sub $400 route. This is kind of the price tier that I live in right now because again, I think Pro Photo is, I think I don't need it. You need 3 things for me. One, a mid-range off-camera flash, like a V1 or an 8200 from Godox. There are other brands. I'm just telling you guys the models that I use. And if you're going to get the V1, add the little magnetic dome to it. It's like $10 and it's a nice thing to have. So one trigger, some that works with your camera body. I use an X3 or an X Pro, also from Godox. I think they're great. And then a really cheap little portable softbox. I've got one also from Godox that fits into like a little packable case like this that you can throw in a checked bag or what have you if you're traveling, and it's like really manageable. And it's nice to be able to soften that light. Like I think that image in the bottom right would have looked a lot better if I had a softbox. So, and then for any of y'all, like if you're kind of nervous about like how do I start using more of this on shoots, on projects, etc. I I wouldn't downplay the fact that a lot of people are totally cool with folks learning and want to see if good things can come out of the camera too. When you've got a handful of shots in with the normal lighting setup that you've got, the natural light place that you're shooting, or whatever it is, take five. Ask at the end and be like, "Hey, I want to take 5 minutes. I'm really trying to get better at Flash. I want to run a few images through this and just see can we get something that looks really cool." So and over time, if you just keep chipping away at it and practicing, it will become a tool and you'll start to see moments where you're like, this is the right use case for Flash. And it's a great thing to have in your kit. So, okay. Recapping, Flash is magicy. It's magic. It's finicky. it is a tool that many who love our craft don't ever learn, and it can turn a drab location into something wild. So, um, I want to take Q&A now. Like, what do we want to know? Let's see what we've got in the chat so far. Okay, first question. I'll hit this one from Liney right away. Lenny, sorry. Let's talk about examples on how to use fill flash on these. I'm happy to do this. So in this situation, like let's just break down this image with Nick on the right. The situation here, you can kind of tell, like if you look, the light is coming from probably like our 1 o'clock, like it's over his back left shoulder right now. And that in your first gut instinct might be like, well, why did you position in that direction? Why are you shooting the image that way? And my answer is just like, because I had to get those mountains in the back. Like I love how that looks. And so that it wasn't really an option, and we were gonna make it happen come hell or high water. So I knew that with him positioned the way that he was, with that car kind of at that 30-degree angle, his essentially the whole left side of his face, for the most part, would be really brightly lit. And you can't tell it here, but on the right side, we really had to find a way to fill that in. my the way we cooked this image was as follows. Flash power was probably about as high as it can get. 1/1, 1/2, maybe 1/4 at the lowest, but we were really pushing that flash. Then, in terms of camera settings, I most likely had my shutter speed at right where you would expect it, 1/200, and I had the aperture as really, really narrow because it was just so bright outside. I can get you exact camera settings as a follow up on this one. Just send me a DM. I should have pulled them. I didn't pull them. But that's basically it. Maximum flash power. Keep your aperture as narrow as you possibly can, or as narrow as you have to properly expose the image. And I think the biggest thing or the biggest last thing that I would call out on this one is the position of the light. So if we're using the frame of the image, like as a clock, that back left, like the 1 o'clock, that's where the light was coming from. So the way I'm holding the flash is in my left hand right here. And tilting it, trying to hit his right side, camera left. It really is, as I say, as simple as the goal was point the light directly at where he's the most shaded and use that to fill it in. It's almost like you're coloring a coloring book. So I hope that answers the question. If you have any follow-ups, just let me know. I'm happy to keep going. Let's see. Shayna. I think there's also something to be said for the choices of light, changing the style to be the style of the photo to be more editorial looking versus not. Yeah, absolutely. And I think clients sometimes feel differently about it too. You know, they will. Some folks really like that really harsh flash look, like just the point and shoot kind of raw aesthetic. And some absolutely don't. And I think one of the best things is when you're about to book a job or when you're thinking through like what a project's going to look like, have a conversation with whoever you're working on it with. Like these are some different ways we can approach the lighting. Do you have any preferences? So, yeah, I agree. Do I have any examples of shooting flash indoors in live events? I don't shoot a ton of events. The thing that I will say is that that framework that I called out is probably going to be really helpful if you're shooting events at night. The biggest call out that I would say is like, I agree with that shutter speed move. I agree with locking your ISO. You might want a wider aperture than f8. Like you might start at f4.5 or something and treat that as your home base and see how much wider or narrower you have to go. So, and I think a lot of folks in the events industry, in the nightlife industry, etc., don't always, they focus more on, especially they'll focus more on bouncing off of a wall or off of a ceiling. That I'm not near as familiar with it. It'll create a really a much softer lighting approach, but I tend to I like the direct flash. It's my preference. So I think that'd be your main move for events is use that framework, but a little bit wider aperture would be my gut instinct based on what the space you're in is. All right, let's see. Decline. I rated myself 1 or 2 on his flash journey, but 99% of his work is film. Yeah. Oh, any added rules of film to consider what with metering, forgiving film stocks, etc. Okay. This is an area that I'm certainly not 10 out of 10, but I can give you a couple of things. Um, One that I have heard of a couple of film photographers really using to quite a bit of success is instead of light metering, or instead of using like an actual dedicated light meter, they'll often use a digital camera as a almost like a bird dog, and they'll have a flash on it. So, like for example, they want to use flash in a situation, they'll break out their digital camera with a flash on it, and they will use that to figure out what their settings should be. Like, okay, cool. I think my aperture should be about here. I think my flash power should be about here, etc. And then they'll let that translate over to what they shoot on film. Um, and because they've already gotten to see some live previews of it. So it's like, okay, I kind of know where I want to be. Now I'll use film. That's one thing. And then the other thing that I've heard is like, even if you're trying to figure out, even if you're trying to figure out like, are there any tweaks that I want to make to like my film speed? I mean, like how I expose my film. I still haven't heard anything that makes me think like go against the guidance of overexpose like a third of a stop or a half a stop if you can. So, but that's one I want to learn more about too. Is flash with film. Like I shoot on a Contax G1 a lot, but it does the work for me for the most part. Like truly, really dialing in manual flash or TTL with film. Whew, that'd be fun to learn. So, um, yeah, Shayna, I think the wide aperture might help. And on bounce, like you might know more about that than me. It's That's something I haven't done a ton of. I shot a few parties really early in my career, and I just like kind of go to bed early, so it just wasn't for me. But I admire the craft a lot, and I think there's some really cool work that comes out of it. So, any other questions? Let's see. Hang on. I'm gonna pull up the YouTube stream. Questions come in faster there. All right. I think that might be it. Whether it's Flash or anything else, is there anything else anyone wants to know? Or do we just want to call it? It's all good if so. I think we're all square. Okay, cool. Very good. Oh, okay, here we go. Is there any way you can get quick? Hey, we got a couple more. Yeah, cool. All right, let's see. Fashion shoot full body with two 8200s. Oh, two. Okay. What's the go-to positioning here? I'm going to try one of two things if it's me. Um, the first one I'm going to try is each flash positioned probably 2 to 3 feet, one to my left, one to my right, just to get like a really nice even fill. The other one that I might try just to see what happens is go one light from one side, maybe 3 to 4 feet off camera, kind of like I mentioned, and then the other try it as a hair light, like position slightly off background, and maybe at like 1 o'clock on frame, and just to see like might that create a really cool look, similar to like if you shoot flash at somebody with the sun right behind them. I think that's like a really interesting aesthetic sometimes. So that would be my first thought on like if I had 200s shooting full body, what do I do? And I think like that's one example right there. Um, the only thing is we had one light there, so had we had the second, we could have done some cool things with it. So those would be my two recommendations. Peter, is there any way you can get quick consistency shooting events with constant exposure changes? Yeah, it's never going to be perfect. But I think your move here is probably TTL, right? And you let the camera do some of the work. And I think you just inherently like with Flash, you kind of have to acknowledge the reality that like you're going to have some misfires. You just are. But I think letting TTL or ETTL, depending on your manufacturer, do some of the work is could be really helpful. And if you already are and you're like it's still not good enough, um, it might just be you got to get so good at like slightly tweaking your aperture, or your shutter speed based on where the image is going to be. But again, that's easier said than done. So yeah. Okay. Um, Decline was thinking of picking up a digital to speed up my workflow and learning. Yeah, for sure. Like I actively know people that'll use like a Fuji GFX or a Sony A7 as their bird dog. So it could help. Shayna, what camera do I typically shoot on? 80-90% of my work is on a Sony A7 IV. And then the glass I'll use is either a Sigma 24 to 70 or a Tamron 35 to 150. I haven't made the jump to any of the like really fancy G Master lenses. Mm, I think those guys are working really good for the price. And when I shoot film, probably, most cases it's the Contax G1 or the Yashica T3 as my low point and shoot. I just really like it. So, um, yeah, do I find flash works better with wider lenses? 100%. I'm so glad you asked that. I need to add these to the slides. This was one thing we realized at the workshop last week, which, like, shame on me. I didn't specify what type of focal length lens people should bring. So we had folks show up with like lenses that were like a nifty 50, which in many situations is a perfectly good lens. Like you can do so much with 50 mil. But I tend to think that that focal length can be, that level of crop can be a bit restrictive, which is why I think folks that shoot a lot of flash photography, their move is almost always like a 24 to 70 or sometimes like a 14 to 24. If you ever see those really super wide angle flash portraits, that's sometimes like a 14 millimeter focal length. So uh, 24 to 70 is so versatile. It's just so powerful. And I think I've never been really a prime lens guy. I know a lot of people are really into fixed focal lengths. I'm just less familiar with it. Um, but I have had really, really good luck with 24 to 70. So I hope that helps. Okay. That's a really good question, by the way. Daniel, my food shots have strong contrast with crushed shadows. I'm trying to maintain depth but keep detail in the shadows. What lighting setup or modifiers would you recommend? That is a great question. Um, let's see. How do we play this one? Trying to maintain depth but recover detail in the shadows. I think my first instinct on this one would be you might be using too narrow an aperture and too strong a flash power. I might be wrong here, but my first gut instinct is like, okay, I want to widen my aperture a little bit and either drop my flash power a bit or move my flash further away. Like, there are world class fashion photographers out there that approach flash in inverse of what I think a lot of us would think, i.e., the gut instinct, I think a lot of times is I want my light to be as close as reasonably possible to my subject, and then I'm going to keep the power as low as possible to have a fast refresh time and things like that. But there are people out there that approach it completely the opposite. And it's like, I want my flash to be as powerful as possible and then keep it away as far as possible from my subject. And their logic is I want it to mimic the sun. Like I want the light to fall on the subject like as gently and softly as possible. So I don't know if that helps, but I think my move for you is can I widen my aperture to let a little more light in and then either drop my flash power or keep it the same and back the flash a little bit away from the subject? I might try that. And then you'll have like less like strong, contrasty, kind of crunchy shadows. I think that might help. So I hope it helps. Let's see. What else? Yeah, Shayna, the two lenses. Sigma 24 to 70. It opens all the way up to f2.8, all the whole way, so that's pretty good. And then the Tamron Tamron 35 to 150. It's f2 to f2.8, so the whole way, which I think is really really nice. Um, yeah, those two lenses, they're great. Let's see. Peter, quite, would you recommend Daniel use a white reflector? That is another really good question. We didn't talk really anything about bounce today. But if you had some level of white reflector kind of off that side where you feel like you have too many shadows, that also might really help you because it'll give you a little bit of bounce. I think it's a great idea. Let's see. Britta, any common mistakes you should avoid when using a flash? Yeah, so many. Okay, a few things. Your aesthetic preferences may be different. So this is just one man. But in general, when I'm shooting with flash, I tend to feel like I wish I would have thrown a little bit more flash power at the subject that, or how about, let me rephrase. My regrets are more often I didn't use enough flash on an image than I used too much. Like I feel it's easier to back an image down a little bit than to brighten an image and make it feel like there was more flash. Other people may be different, but I tend to want to overexpose a little bit. It not necessarily in the whole image, but in the how much the power of my light. So that, I think that's one thing. Um, I think another thing would be I probably waited too long to make the jump from a really cheap speed light that I couldn't shoot off camera with to be able to do something that could receive a wireless signal. Like, that $300 or $400 I spent on that initial Godox that could trigger wirelessly, this photo right here that you can see me on this PowerPoint, that was the first time I ever really cracked off camera flash. And I felt like it added an entirely new dimension to my work. So I think that maybe the other thing is I was a little too cheap on equipment for too long, which I can be at times. And I should have made the move faster because I love how it looks. So, what else? Anything else? I think we're good. Okay. If anybody has any other questions, send me a DM. Let me know. Like, my goal is to help. Um, I like getting to do these things. So if people keep showing up, we'll keep making it happen every so often. And thank you for your time today. Ultimately, it just helps me make this thing even better and better. And yeah, help other people. So with that, I think we will wrap it up. Everybody have a good time and have a really nice rest of your Sunday, however much there is left. And yeah, we'll catch up some next time. So thank you.